When my son told me the garage was good enough for me because his wife didn't want peasants in her house, I nodded quietly and walked to my cot beside the lawnmower. Then I opened my laptop and pressed send on 47 audio files to his company's HR department. By morning, Jonathan's corporate career was over. But that was just the beginning of what I had planned. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The small digital recorder clicked softly as I pressed the stop button, the red light fading to black. Through the thin garage door, I could hear Jonathan's voice carrying from the kitchen, explaining to someone on the phone why his quarterly numbers were so impressive. The same voice that had told me an hour earlier that sharing meals with the family was no longer appropriate for someone of my station. I'd been living in their garage for 8 months, not by choice, but because Victoria had made it clear that my presence in the main house was affecting her ability to entertain properly. Professional couples from Jonathan's firm, she'd explained, expected a certain atmosphere when they visited. An aging father in work clothes didn't fit the image they were cultivating. The cot creaked as I sat down, placing the recorder carefully in the wooden box beside my pillow. 47 recordings now. 8 months of conversations captured through the thin walls, through open windows, through careless moments when they thought the old man in the garage couldn't hear them discussing his future. My phone showed 6:30 p.m. Dinner would be served soon. In the dining room, I was no longer welcome to enter. The aroma of roasted chicken drifted through the garage door, mixing with the smell of motor oil and fertilizer that had become my constant companions. 3 weeks ago, Jonathan had gotten the promotion he'd been chasing for 5 years. Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian Financial. The corner office, the company car, the salary that let Victoria quit her job to focus on being the perfect executive wife. The success had made them bold in ways that surprised even me. I pulled out my laptop, an old Dell that Jonathan assumed I used for solitaire and email. The Wi-Fi password hadn't changed since I'd helped them set up the network when they bought the house. Back when I was still considered family instead of an embarrassment to be hidden away. The first audio file loaded with a soft chime. Victoria's voice, crystal clear, recorded 2 weeks ago when she thought I was at the library. "Jonathan, darling, your father simply has to go. The Hendersons are coming for dinner tomorrow, and Robert just made partner. I cannot have him see some old man shuffling around in work clothes." Jonathan's response came through just as clearly. "Where exactly do you suggest he go, Victoria? It's not like we can just throw him out on the street. There are facilities for people like him, places where he'd be with his own kind, working-class people who understand boundaries." The recording continued for 12 minutes. Victoria outlining her research into assisted living facilities, Jonathan expressing concerns about the cost, both of them discussing my future as if I were an inconvenient piece of furniture to be stored somewhere out of sight. I closed the laptop and walked to the small window that faced the backyard. The house glowed with warm light, every room decorated with the expensive furniture Victoria had insisted they needed to properly entertain. The dining room table I'd helped Jonathan pick out when he first started making decent money. The living room set I'd co-signed for when his credit wasn't quite established. My reflection stared back from the dark window. 72 years old, silver hair thinning, hands marked by 45 years of construction work. The father who'd worked double shifts to put Jonathan through college, who'd refinanced his own house to help with a down payment on theirs, who'd quietly moved into the garage 8 months ago because saying no would have meant losing access to his son entirely. The garage door connecting to the house opened with its familiar squeak. Victoria appeared in the doorway holding a covered plate. She didn't step inside, just set it on the workbench and backed away slightly. "Edward, dinner," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I made extra chicken." "Thank you, Victoria." I waited until she turned to leave before adding, "Will Jonathan be working late again tonight?" "He has calls with the Singapore office, very important for the Henderson acquisition." She paused, her hand on the door handle. "Edward, we need to discuss your situation soon." This arrangement was supposed to be temporary. Of course, whenever you're ready to talk. She nodded and disappeared back into the house. The lock clicked softly, a sound I'd grown accustomed to. They locked the connecting door every night now, ostensibly for security, but I understood the real reason. Physical barriers made it easier to forget about the inconvenient father in the garage. I uncovered the plate: chicken breast, roasted vegetables, a dinner roll still warm from the oven. Good food, served on their everyday dishes instead of the fine china I'd helped them buy for special occasions. The message was subtle but clear. I was fed, not served; maintained, not welcomed. The laptop hummed as it powered back up. 47 recordings, organized by date and topic. Conversations about my declining usefulness. Discussions of what to do with someone who'd outlived his purpose in their upwardly mobile lifestyle. Casual remarks about my intelligence, my appearance, my worth as a human being. File number 12, recorded 3 weeks ago. Victoria explaining to her sister on the phone why her father-in-law couldn't attend their anniversary party. He just doesn't understand appropriate social behavior anymore. Last time we had the Whitneys over, he tried to join the conversation about the stock market. It was embarrassing for everyone. Jonathan had laughed in the background. He thinks reading the newspaper makes him an expert on finance. The old me would have been hurt by their words, the man who'd moved into their garage to maintain a relationship with his only child, who'd swallowed his pride daily to avoid confrontation, who'd convinced himself that any connection was better than none. But 8 months of listening to their private conversations had changed something fundamental. I wasn't just their unwanted burden anymore. I was a man with evidence. My phone showed 7 missed calls from my lawyer, Margaret Chen. I'd been avoiding her for weeks, knowing she was calling about the papers I'd asked her to prepare. The documents I'd been too hesitant to sign, too afraid of burning bridges that might still be repairable. I called her back. "Edward, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know, Margaret. I've been thinking. The papers are ready whenever you want to move forward. But Edward, once we file these, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" Through the thin wall, I could hear Jonathan on another phone call. Something about market projections and profit margins. The confident voice of a man who'd forgotten that his corner office success was built on sacrifices made by someone he now considered too embarrassing to acknowledge. "File the papers, Margaret." "All of them? The property transfers? The inheritance modifications? Everything we discussed?" "Everything. And Margaret? I'll be sending you some additional documentation tonight. Audio files that might be relevant to the elder abuse claims." The silence on her end stretched for several seconds. "Edward, what kind of audio files?" "Conversations, recorded over the past 8 months. Very clear, very detailed conversations about my living situation and their future plans for me." "My God, Edward! Do they know you've been recording them?" I looked around the garage at my carefully arranged living space. The cot positioned near the outlet where I charged the recorder each night, the laptop hidden behind paint cans, the Wi-Fi connection they'd never thought to secure with a new password. "They have no idea." After hanging up with Margaret, I spent 2 hours organizing the audio files into categories. Financial discussions where they calculated my monthly costs like overhead expenses. Social conversations where Victoria explained to friends why her father-in-law wasn't present at gatherings. Planning sessions where they researched assisted living facilities like they were shopping for storage units. The most damaging recordings were the recent ones. Jonathan's promotion had made them careless, confident enough to speak openly about timeline and strategies. Victoria's voice from last Tuesday: "The Shady Oaks facility has an opening next month. We could have him moved before the Christmas party season really gets started." Jonathan's response: "What about the guilt factor? He did help us buy this house." "Darling, we can't let sentiment cloud our judgment. Your career is just taking off. The right social connections are crucial at this level. Having him around is like dragging an anchor. I copied the files onto 3 separate flash drives, then uploaded everything to the secure cloud storage Margaret had set up for my case. 47 conversations, each one time-stamped and crystal clear. 8 months of evidence that my living situation wasn't a generous arrangement to help an aging father, but a calculated warehousing of an inconvenience. The garage grew cold as evening settled over the neighborhood. I could hear the dinner party preparations beginning in the house, Victoria's laughter mixing with unfamiliar voices, Jonathan playing host to colleagues and their wives. The successful couple entertaining in style, no awkward father figure to interrupt their carefully crafted image. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Robert Murphy. "Ed, haven't seen you around lately. Everything okay?" Robert lived 2 houses down and had no idea I was sleeping in the garage. As far as the neighborhood knew, I was living comfortably with my successful son and his charming wife. Jonathan had been careful to maintain that fiction, understanding instinctively that the optics of warehousing his elderly father would reflect poorly on his character. I typed back, "All good, Robert. Just keeping a low profile." At 9 p.m., the dinner party was in full swing. Through the connecting door, I could hear the conversation flowing over wine and dessert. Market trends, vacation plans, private school recommendations for children I'd never met. The comfortable chatter of people who'd never worried about where they'd sleep or whether they were welcome at their own family's dinner table. Victoria's laugh carried clearly through the thin walls, followed by a story about their recent weekend in Napa Valley. The same weekend when she'd told me they couldn't afford to fix the garage heater, leaving me to layer sweaters through October's cold nights. The laptop chimed softly as my email loaded. Margaret's response to the audio files I'd sent came through marked urgent. "Edward, I've reviewed the first dozen recordings. This is stronger evidence than I expected. The conversations clearly establish a pattern of deliberate isolation and emotional abuse. Combined with the financial documentation you provided earlier, we have grounds for a comprehensive elder abuse case that could result in criminal charges, not just civil remedies. Are you prepared for the consequences? This will destroy their reputations permanently." I read the email twice, then looked around the garage that had been my world for 8 months. The space heater I'd bought myself when they refused to fix the broken furnace vent. The mini refrigerator where I stored the groceries I bought with my Social Security check. The folding chair I'd salvaged from their basement when they decided the living room needed new furniture. Was I prepared for the consequences of destroying their reputations? After 8 months of being treated like an inconvenience, after listening to them plan my removal like I was a piece of unwanted furniture, after being locked out of the house I'd helped them buy? I typed my response. "File everything, Margaret. Tomorrow morning." The party continued past midnight. I lay on the cot listening to the gradual exodus of guests, the cleanup conversations, the satisfied debriefing between Jonathan and Victoria about how well the evening had gone. Jonathan's voice carried clearly through the wall. "I think the Henderson connection is solid now. Robert seemed genuinely interested in the Singapore expansion." Victoria's response was muffled but enthusiastic. They were building their network, establishing the social foundation for Jonathan's continued climb up the corporate ladder. Every connection carefully cultivated, every impression meticulously managed. No room in that strategy for an aging father in work clothes. I checked my email one more time before sleep. 3 messages from Margaret, each marked urgent. The legal papers had been filed. The audio evidence had been forwarded to the appropriate authorities. The process that would unravel Jonathan's carefully constructed professional life was already in motion. But there was one more element to my plan, one Margaret didn't know about yet. I opened a new email and typed the address I'd memorized weeks ago. hrcomplaints@meridianfinancial.com. Jonathan's company took elder abuse seriously, especially from senior executives whose behavior could reflect negatively on the firm's reputation. Their ethics hotline was prominently featured on the website, encouraging employees to report conduct that violated company values. The email was brief and professional. To whom it may concern, I am writing to report concerning behavior by one of your senior executives, Jonathan Mitchell, Senior Vice President of Operations. I have documented evidence of ongoing elder abuse, including audio recordings of conversations where Mr. Mitchell discusses his father as a burden to his career advancement and makes arrangements to have him removed from the family home against his wishes. These recordings, spanning 8 months, clearly establish a pattern of behavior that I believe violates Meridian Financial's stated commitment to family values and ethical conduct. I am prepared to provide this evidence to your internal investigation team. The subject matter is time-sensitive, as Mr. Mitchell is currently proceeding with plans to forcibly relocate his 72-year-old father to a facility against his consent. I attached the 3 most damaging audio files, including Victoria's conversation about removing me before the Christmas party season, and Jonathan's discussion of the guilt factor versus his career advancement. The send button hovered under my cursor for several minutes. Once I pressed it, there would be no possibility of reconciliation. Jonathan's career at Meridian would be finished. Victoria's social ambitions would crumble along with their reputation. The comfortable life they'd built on my sacrifices would implode. Through the garage door, I could hear Jonathan setting the security system, Victoria turning off lights, the house settling into quiet. Tomorrow morning, Jonathan would wake up confident about his future, unaware that his corporate success was about to become a cautionary tale. I pressed send. The confirmation appeared instantly. Your message has been sent to Meridian Financial Human Resources. You will receive a response within 48 hours. I closed the laptop and settled onto the cot. The garage felt different now, not like a prison, but like a command center. For 8 months, I'd been warehoused here while they lived their upgraded life. But I'd been listening, recording, documenting every conversation that revealed their true character. Tomorrow, the consequences would begin. Thursday morning brought an unexpected knock on the garage's side door. I opened it to find 2 people in business suits, a woman in her 40s with a serious expression, and a younger man carrying a briefcase. Mr. Mitchell? I'm Detective Sarah Reynolds, Adult Protective Services. This is James Park from the District Attorney's Office. We need to speak with you about your living situation. Well, they'd moved faster than I'd expected. Margaret must have expedited the filing process, understanding the urgency of the situation. I invited them into the garage, watching their faces as they took in my living arrangements. Detective Reynolds photographed everything methodically. The cot, the space heater, the mini refrigerator, the folding chair. James Park examined the connecting door to the house, noting the lock that could only be opened from the inside. Mr. Mitchell, we've received some concerning reports about your treatment here. Are you living in this garage voluntarily? The question I'd been rehearsing for months. My son and daughter-in-law suggested this arrangement would work better for everyone. They needed privacy for entertaining business associates. And you agreed to this? I wanted to maintain a relationship with my family. This seemed like the only option. Detective Reynolds sat carefully on the folding chair. Mr. Mitchell, we have evidence suggesting this arrangement wasn't entirely voluntary. Audio recordings of conversations between your son and his wife discussing plans to move you to a facility against your wishes. I nodded slowly. I've been documenting some concerning conversations, yes. You recorded these conversations yourself? From this garage, through the walls and windows, they weren't aware I could hear them so clearly. James Park opened his briefcase and pulled out a digital tablet. We'd like you to walk through these recordings with us, help us understand the context and timeline. For the next 2 hours, we listened to selected conversations. Detective Reynolds took notes while James Park recorded my explanations of when and where each conversation had occurred. The evidence was more comprehensive than I'd realized, painting a clear picture of deliberate isolation and psychological manipulation. Mr. Mitchell, Detective Reynolds said finally, this constitutes elder abuse under state law. Your son and daughter-in-law face potential criminal charges for willful endangerment and psychological abuse of a vulnerable adult. What happens now? We'll need to conduct interviews with both of them. Today, if possible. Are they currently home? Through the garage window, I could see Jonathan's BMW in the driveway. He'd taken a rare day off to handle some home repairs, unaware that his world was about to collapse. They should both be inside. The doorbell rang 15 minutes later. I listened through the connecting wall as Victoria answered, her voice bright with the assumed confidence of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Good morning. We're here to speak with Jonathan Mitchell about a family matter. I'm sorry, who are you? Detective Reynolds, Adult Protective Services. Mr. Park from the District Attorney's Office. Is your husband available? The silence stretched long enough that I could picture Victoria's face processing this information. Adult Protective Services, District Attorney's Office. The implications hitting her like cold water. I'll get him. What followed was the most satisfying conversation I'd heard in 8 months. Jonathan's attempts to explain the garage arrangement as a temporary convenience. Victoria's increasingly desperate insistence that they'd been nothing but generous to an aging father. Detective Reynolds calmly presenting selected audio clips that contradicted every claim they made. Mr. Mitchell, in this recording from October 15th, you and your wife discuss having your father moved to Shady Oaks facility. You express concern about guilt factor, but conclude that your career advancement outweighs sentimental considerations. Can you explain this conversation? Jonathan's voice cracked as he tried to provide context. That was just, we were exploring options. He seemed unhappy in the garage, and we thought a professional facility might be better for him. Yet in the same conversation, your wife refers to him as dragging an anchor on your career prospects. That doesn't sound like concern for his welfare. The questioning continued for over an hour. I listened to 8 months of careful image management crumble under professional scrutiny. Every explanation sounded weaker than the last, every justification exposed by their own recorded words. Finally, Detective Reynolds delivered the conclusion. Based on the evidence we've reviewed, we're opening a formal investigation into elder abuse. Mr. Mitchell, you and your wife will need to appear for additional questioning downtown. In the meantime, your father's living situation needs to change immediately. What do you mean? He can't continue living in your garage while under investigation for abuse. Either you restore him to appropriate accommodations within your home, or we'll need to arrange alternative housing. The connecting door opened 20 minutes later. Jonathan appeared, his face pale and shell-shocked. Victoria stood behind him, her carefully maintained composure completely shattered. Dad, Jonathan said quietly, we need to talk. I'd been waiting 8 months for this conversation. Of course, son. The guest room upstairs. We'd like you to move back into the house. Today. Are you sure that's what Victoria wants? I wouldn't want to affect her ability to entertain properly. Victoria flinched at her own words being used against her. Edward, there's been a misunderstanding. We never intended for you to feel unwelcome. I see. And the recordings? Jonathan's face crumbled. You recorded us? I recorded conversations that occurred in my living space. Your voices carried clearly through these thin walls. I never had to leave the garage to hear your discussions about my future. Dad, I can explain. No need, Jonathan. Your explanations are all preserved digitally. Detective Reynolds has copies now. The weight of consequences was settling over them like morning fog. Jonathan's corporate career, built so carefully over 15 years, was hanging by a thread. Victoria's social ambitions, her network of carefully cultivated relationships, would evaporate the moment news of the investigation became public. What can we do? Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we fix this? I looked around the garage that had been my world for 8 months. The space heater I'd bought when they wouldn't fix the heat. The folding chair I'd salvaged when they redecorated. The mini refrigerator where I'd stored groceries I bought with my own money while they lived off income generated by assets I'd helped them acquire. You can start by understanding that actions have consequences, Victoria. 8 months of treating me like an inconvenience while benefiting from my sacrifices. 8 months of planning my removal like I was unwanted furniture. That kind of behavior doesn't get fixed with apologies. My phone rang. Margaret Chin's name appeared on the screen. Edward, I just heard from the DA's office. The investigation is moving forward rapidly, but there's something else you need to know. Meridian Financial called. They want to schedule a meeting about the HR complaint. When? Tomorrow morning. They're taking this very seriously. Edward, Jonathan's career is about to end. Through the connecting door, I could see Jonathan slumped at their kitchen table, Victoria standing beside him with her hand on his shoulder. 8 months ago, they'd been confident enough to lock me out of the house every night. Now they faced criminal charges and professional destruction. Margaret, let's proceed with everything. The criminal complaint, the civil suit, all of it. Are you absolutely certain? Once we're in motion, there's no undoing this. I looked at the cot where I'd slept for 8 months. The space they'd given me was smaller than most prison cells, equipped with cast-off furniture and minimal heating. But it had taught me something valuable about who they really were beneath their carefully maintained facades. I'm certain. The guest room they moved me to that afternoon felt foreign after 8 months in the garage. Clean sheets, proper furniture, a window that looked out over their backyard instead of the neighbor's fence. Victoria had prepared it hastily, her hands shaking as she arranged fresh towels and emptied drawers to make space for my belongings. Edward, she said as I unpacked my few possessions, I hope you understand we never meant for you to feel unwanted. Victoria, I have recordings of you planning my removal to make room for your Christmas parties. I don't think there's much room for misunderstanding. She left without another word. Friday morning, Jonathan dressed for work with unusual care. His best suit, conservative tie, the image of professional respectability he'd cultivated so carefully. He was scheduled to meet with Meridian's HR department at 10 a.m. to discuss the complaint I'd filed. Dad, he said as I poured coffee in their kitchen, the first time I'd been allowed in this room for 8 months. Whatever you told them, however you presented this situation, there might be things you don't understand about corporate pressure. I understand that corporate executives are held to higher standards of ethical behavior, Jonathan. Meridian's website makes that very clear. His face went pale. You researched the company policies? I researched everything, son. Employment contracts, ethics guidelines, senior executive conduct standards. Meridian takes family values very seriously. Elder abuse tends to undermine that image. The drive to Meridian's downtown offices took 20 minutes. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, occasionally glancing at me like I was a bomb about to explode. He still didn't understand the full scope of what I'd documented, the comprehensive evidence that would make denial impossible. The HR conference room was sterile and professional. 3 people sat across from Jonathan. Director of Human Resources Patricia Williams, Legal Counsel Michael Chang, and someone introduced only as Mr. Stevens from Corporate Risk Management, 1. Patricia Williams opened a folder and spread several documents across the table. Mr. Mitchell, we've received serious allegations about your treatment of your elderly father. Before we proceed, I want to give you the opportunity to provide your perspective on these claims. Jonathan launched into his prepared explanation. Temporary housing arrangements, mutual agreement, concern for his father's comfort and safety. The same justifications he'd given Detective Reynolds, delivered with the smooth confidence of someone accustomed to managing corporate relationships. Patricia Williams listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When Jonathan finished, she opened her laptop and turned it so the screen was visible to everyone. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to play several audio recordings that were provided with the complaint. I'd like you to listen carefully and then explain how these conversations align with your description of mutual agreement and concern for your father's welfare. Peace. The first recording filled the conference room with crystal clarity. Victoria's voice discussing my removal before the Christmas party season. Jonathan agreeing that my presence was becoming a liability to his career advancement. Their casual calculation of the monthly costs of maintaining me versus the benefits of having me removed. Jonathan's face went ashen as his own voice betrayed every justification he'd just offered. The second recording was worse. Their discussion of assisted living facilities, comparing prices like they were shopping for storage units. Victoria's comment about me being with my own kind among working-class people who understood boundaries. By the third recording, Jonathan had stopped trying to maintain his composure. His career was ending in real time, destroyed by his own words preserved in digital clarity. Michael Chang closed his laptop and leaned forward. Mr. Mitchell, Meridian Financial has a zero-tolerance policy regarding the abuse of vulnerable adults. Our senior executives are expected to exemplify the highest standards of personal conduct, both in professional and family relationships. I can explain the context of these conversations. The context is clear from the recordings, Patricia Williams interrupted. You and your wife systematically isolated your elderly father, housed him in substandard conditions, and made plans to forcibly relocate him against his wishes. This behavior is fundamentally incompatible with Meridian's values and your position as a senior executive. Mr. Stevens spoke for the first time. Mr. Mitchell, effective immediately. You're suspended without pay, pending a full investigation. Your corporate access is terminated. Security will escort you from the building. The meeting that had taken 15 years to build toward lasted 27 minutes. Jonathan sat in his car in the Meridian parking garage for over an hour, staring at the building where his corner office had been. I waited beside him, not speaking, letting the weight of consequences settle over him like concrete. 30 years, he finally said. 30 years building my career, and it's gone. 8 months, I replied. 8 months I lived in your garage while you planned my removal. Seems like a fair exchange. Dad, I'm sorry. We made mistakes, but destroying my career doesn't solve anything. Jonathan, you made choices. Every conversation I recorded was a choice you made about how to treat your father. The consequences are just the natural result of those choices. We drove home in silence. Victoria was waiting in the living room, her face etched with the kind of despair that comes from watching a carefully constructed life collapse in real time. What happened? She asked, though Jonathan's expression had already provided the answer. And it's over. They have recordings, Victoria. Everything we said, all our plans, they have it all. Victoria turned to me with something approaching hatred. Are you happy now, Edward? You've destroyed everything we worked for. I documented everything you said, Victoria. Your own words destroyed what you worked for. My phone rang. Margaret Chen with an update. Edward, the criminal investigation is moving forward rapidly. The district attorney is considering felony charges for elder abuse and endangerment. But there's something else. 3 news outlets have picked up the story. Jonathan's suspension from Meridian is becoming public. I looked at Jonathan and Victoria, both of them staring at me with a dawning realization that their humiliation was about to become very public indeed. Margaret, let them proceed with everything. The first news article appeared online that evening. Meridian financial executive suspended after elder abuse investigation. The story was brief but devastating, quoting anonymous sources about Jonathan's treatment of his elderly father and Meridian's commitment to ethical conduct among senior staff. Victoria read the article 3 times, her face growing paler with each repetition. Edward, people will know. Everyone in our social circle will see this. The same social circle you were afraid I'd embarrass with my working-class background? She had no answer for that. The next morning brought reporters to their front door. Jonathan refused to comment, but cameras captured him hurrying to his car while questions were shouted about elder abuse and corporate responsibility. The image would run on evening news broadcasts across the region. My phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting interviews, lawyers offering to represent me, advocacy groups seeking to make my case a symbol of elder rights. I declined most requests, but agreed to speak with one reporter who'd covered elder abuse issues extensively. Mr. Mitchell, what would you like people to understand about your situation? That elder abuse isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's being quietly warehoused in a garage while your family benefits from your lifetime of sacrifices. Sometimes it's being treated like an inconvenience rather than a person. And sometimes the people doing it convince themselves they're being generous. The interview aired that evening, my face visible for the first time in the growing scandal. A 72-year-old man in work clothes, speaking calmly about months of systematic isolation and manipulation. Jonathan watched from their living room, his successful executive image contrasting sharply with my simple appearance. 8 months ago, that contrast had embarrassed him. Now it damned him. The criminal charges were filed on Tuesday morning: felony elder abuse, willful endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud related to their plans to gain control of my assets through forced institutionalization. Jonathan and Victoria were arrested at their home, the scene captured by news crews who'd been monitoring the story. I watched from the guest room window as they were led away in handcuffs, their neighbors gathering to witness the downfall of the perfect couple who'd lived in the showcase house on their quiet suburban street. Margaret called that afternoon with updates. Edward, the DA, is offering them a plea bargain, reduced charges in exchange for restitution and admission of guilt. They're also facing a civil lawsuit that could result in significant financial damages. What kind of restitution? Full compensation for your housing expenses, medical costs, and pain and suffering, plus punitive damages for the emotional abuse. We're talking about several $100,000. The same house I'd helped them buy with my down payment money, the same house they'd locked me out of while living off assets I'd helped them acquire, would now be sold to pay for the consequences of their treatment of me. Justice had a symmetry that felt almost artistic. The plea hearing was scheduled for the following month. Jonathan and Victoria would admit guilt, accept criminal probation, and pay restitution that would bankrupt them. Jonathan's career in finance was permanently finished, his name associated with elder abuse in every online search. Their social circle evaporated with stunning speed. The same professional couples they'd entertained so carefully distanced themselves from the scandal. Victoria's charity board positions disappeared. Their country club membership was quietly revoked. The life they'd built on my sacrifices, the image they'd maintained by warehousing me in their garage, crumbled completely under the weight of their own recorded words. I moved out of their house the day before the plea hearing. Margaret had found me a comfortable apartment in a senior living community, paid for with the advance on my restitution settlement. Real furniture, central heating, neighbors who welcomed conversation instead of hiding their inconvenient father figure. Jonathan came to see me off, his face hollow with the kind of exhaustion that comes from watching everything you've worked for disappear. Dad, I know apologies are meaningless at this point, but I want you to know I understand what we did wrong. Do you, Jonathan? We treated you like you were disposable, like your sacrifices for our family didn't matter anymore once we'd achieved success. We warehoused you in the garage and convinced ourselves we were being generous. I nodded, loading the last box into my car. And what have you learned from that? That success without character is just an expensive way to fail. It was perhaps the wisest thing he'd ever said to me. The apartment community welcomed me with the kind of genuine warmth I hadn't experienced in years. My neighbors were people like me, retirees who'd worked hard and raised families, and were now enjoying the respect they'd earned through decades of contribution to their communities. No one here saw me as an embarrassment to be hidden away. No one calculated the cost of my presence against their social ambitions. No one locked doors between us or planned my removal to make room for more important relationships. 6 months later, Margaret called with final news about the case. "Edward, it's over. The plea deal is complete. The restitution has been paid, and the civil case is settled. You're financially secure for the rest of your life." And Jonathan? Working at a small accounting firm downtown, Victoria found a job at a department store. They're renting a small apartment in the suburbs, driving used cars, living paycheck to paycheck, the complete opposite of the lifestyle they'd built on your sacrifices. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd warehoused me in a garage to preserve their upwardly mobile image, and now they were living the working-class lifestyle they'd been so afraid of me representing. But I felt no satisfaction in their downfall. What I felt was relief. Relief that manipulation no longer worked on me, that threats about family relationships had no power, that financial abuse had been exposed and punished. I'd learned something valuable in that garage during 8 months of systematic humiliation. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are actually using you. Sometimes family loyalty is a one-way street that leads to exploitation. And sometimes the only way to restore your dignity is to document the truth and let consequences follow naturally from actions. The digital recorder sits in my desk drawer now, no longer needed. The garage where I lived for 8 months has been converted back to storage space, though I doubt Jonathan and Victoria have the luxury of a 2-car garage anymore. They got exactly what they wanted. I was removed from their lives completely, permanently, in a way that ensured I'd never embarrass them socially again. But they also got exactly what they deserved. The consequences of treating a father like disposable furniture, preserved forever in their own recorded words. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.